So briefly, my background is in corporate America, and then I married into an entrepreneurial family and inherited through my husband ownership of pizza restaurants, and then subsequently we started GivingTrax. So we're still doing both, and I thought today, maybe we can best use this time just to answer questions about what's it like. We have a perspective on both, two different plays, if you will, a lifestyle company and then a high-tech play with GivingTrax. And we can compare, contrast, we can answer any questions that you might have about what it's like, how it's different, and so on. So that's what I thought I would open with today and make sure that we hit what's on your mind as it relates to this topic.
What's the hardest difference? Or like what would you say is the hardest one for tech companies and the hardest for service, I guess, or like food?
They're different. So food is it's business to consumer. So you have the consumer element that comes into play, as opposed to GivingTrax, which is a B2B. So they're different in that sense. The risk that you take on is also different. So in the restaurant business, as with many small businesses where you have physical space that you're leasing, you oftentimes have to provide a personal guarantee for that lease. So you might be signing a lease that's $10,000 a month for 10 years, and you're personally guaranteeing the sum total of that. So it's different in that sense in terms of the risk that you take on.
That's huge.
What's more capital intensive? Is it?
It is hugely capital intensive, really on both sides. So GivingTrax, we ourselves put in $500,000 to build it, to put the software in place, get the initial core infrastructure set up, and so on. The ongoing costs now it's pretty self-sufficient. So we don't foresee a need to have another big capital investment. Whereas in restaurants, every 7 to 10 years, you need to remodel your store. It's getting beat up. Consumers it's just
modernizing it,
refreshing the look and feel.
Changing the technology a little bit.
Yep.
Updating it.
Updating the POS system. So there's always going to be every 5 to 10 years the need to put in $150,000 into that business to keep it kind of fresh and current, and repair and maintenance elements. So it's different in that sense.
I have a question for the food business, so more the consumer business. Your business plan currently, does it allow for an easy increase in restaurants, where you have your costs and your profit can easily be add one store for growth?
So we just reopened a new store and moved one. It was about $800,000 to build out the new RoundTable Clubhouse.
One.
So it's very, very expensive. Up until 2008, we had a line of credit with KeyBank on the restaurant side. And one day my husband comes home with an appraiser for the house when the economy was crashing. And overnight we had to apply for a $400,000 loan to keep the doors open. And ever since then, we've not been able to get bank financing for RoundTable, even though it's been in business for 25 years. Just our 3 stores have been in place for 25 years. We can't get bank financing, so we're tasked with self-financing or finding financing partners to expand. The other consideration that we have for expansion is if we were to open one more store, then we're obligated under Obamacare to provide health care to employees, most of whom are your age or younger. we have a few managers, but most of our workers are first-time workers, high school workers and or young adults.
Not my age.
Probably young, relative to our age. So that's the challenge we can't afford it. We can't even afford the tax. So if we chose the option of paying the tax instead of providing the benefit, it's not affordable. So we're capped right now at 3 stores.
So you're a franchise owner?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
we're a franchisee.
And then, I'm sorry, I am not familiar with GivingTrax.
Oh, sorry. So I married into the RoundTable. GivingTrax we started, and it's software for corporate charitable giving. It didn't start out that way. We started out intending to build a community giving platform for restaurants and other consumer-facing businesses, and quickly discovered that was shortly after the economy had downturned. And so what we found was restaurants are dealing with staff not showing to work. They're dealing with cash flow challenges, equipment breaking. Charitable giving is like at the bottom of the list, and it never quite bubbles up. So we ended up pivoting to corporate giving and built out tools for corporate charitable giving, grant making, employee giving, matching gifts. So we can offer a variety of different programs, with the exception of we don't currently offer giving by payroll on the GivingTrax side.
So you wouldn't deduct?
Not
a
by payroll.
Like a CFC program?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Meaning combined federal
Yes.
campaign, right? Yeah. We don't want to get into that market. We see it as
Something already been tapped?
it's been tapped, it's old. If you follow the flow of money, it can take months before the nonprofit actually receives funds that you've donated through payroll deduction. And so in this new economy of instant kind of everything, our goal is to ensure that the recipient organization receives their money within 2 days. So if you swipe your credit card or give using a debit card, they'll receive that contribution within 2 days.
Is this a nonprofit? GivingTrax?
GivingTrax is a for-profit company. We're a marketplace. Like Airbnb is a marketplace. We're a marketplace. Organizations that are charitable and schools can register their organization to fundraise within the marketplace. And then we serve corporate clients who pay to use the software to manage their outbound charitable giving to those organizations.
It's kind of funny though, because there's corporations and nonprofits do a lot of fundraising. They didn't. So you kind of fell into this product because they didn't have a method of keeping track of giving and all that.
Not in the mid-market space. So there's the Pepsis and Coca-Colas. There's products that serve that Fortune 100 space. But for mid-market companies, there really wasn't an option that was affordable. And we had a client who was willing to work with us to build out the capabilities and was willing to pay for it, which is one of the things that really helped to ensure our viability, was their willingness to do that. And I think that's one thing that we would share as a recommendation is to, if you're looking at something that you would sell to other businesses, is to go out and try to find a business who's willing to pay you to build it. Because that way you know that whatever it is that you're building is valued by companies, at least a handful, if you can get validation that they're willing to pay you to build it, for us, it was really helpful. So that's kind of resulted in us migrating to really focusing on that market and then building out more capabilities to serve the mid-market space. So our target on the GivingTrax side is, at a minimum, companies that can pay $250 a month is kind of the bar. If you can't pay that, then you don't have a big enough problem to use a software tool to fix it. You can use Excel. And on the high end, we try to stay below 25,000, because once you get above 25,000, you get into an RFP process that can elongate a sales cycle for months, if not years. So our goal is to position ourselves in that space where we don't have to respond to an RFP. We won't. If somebody wants us to, we decline. That's not a good client for us. So it's really, we've spent a lot of time to hone in on what does a good client look like for our business. Sorry about that.
So what kind of advice would you, because these are two app guys or software guys, and they're going through a process of learning, what the purpose of what they're trying to develop. I mean, as far as your experience, heartaches and all that, what do you,
Oh my gosh.
What do you recommend to them?
So it's really easy to put something out there right now, right, on the web. And if you've probably heard a lot about the minimum viable product. So we kind of use that approach. We're always adapting, and we push updates almost every week. At least twice a month, we'll push an update. Just kind of continuously iterative, which allows us to check the quality of the software, get some feedback on it, tweak it if we need to tweak it, and so on. But when we first launched, and even still, we do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, kind of by hand. We want to make it easy and transparent for the client, no matter what it takes. So initially, we were, in terms of the charitable giving side, it was fairly difficult. We would get monies deposited into a merchant account, and then checks would be drawn on that, and so on and so forth. And now we're using Stripe, which is a third-party payment system similar to PayPal. And they already have thousands and thousands of nonprofits that have Stripe accounts, so it's really easy for them to connect their Stripe account to GivingTrax. So when donors make a contribution, it bypasses us entirely. It goes directly to that recipient. But when we started, Stripe wasn't even out yet. So there's that kind of evolution that takes place. We spent a lot of time trying to design the perfect product, and we designed a perfect product that wouldn't sell. So I think it's really important to meet with people who would be buying whatever it is that you're building, if it's a B2B, to get a sense of what are they willing to pay you to build. And it should be at least 10 grand. If they're not willing to pay you $10,000 to build it, people pay $20,000 to build a website. They'll pay a little marketing firm. There's a few here in Tacoma. So if they're willing to pay $20,000 to have a website built that's kind of static-y content, right? They should be able to be willing to pay you $10,000 to build at least whatever it is that you have in mind. And anything that you can reuse and share with others will help you to be more profitable. So you're not, the one thing that we did well is we have a front-end configuration tool. I can check and uncheck things and tweak our software to adapt to nearly any business workflow. So we don't have multiple instances of GivingTrax installed for various different clients. It's all one infrastructure.
Oh, that's really smart. That's awesome. So it scales
It scales
really easily.
Yes.
Okay, that's really nice.
Is that an online system then? Oh.
Yep.
What did you start out with, like a coding experience, or I guess
I have none.
How did you go about that? Like, did you just call somebody who was like, hey, who's a good coder and who can write this for me, or you know what I mean?
How did you find the people that built the system?
I know you obviously had a lot of capital because they're paying you to do it, but
We paid somebody to build it initially and pitched it because it never worked. And then at that point, we assessed whether or not to continue, and we brought in a technology counterpart to help initially build it, and went through an accelerator and so on. And through unforeseen circumstances, our technical co-founder moved to Hawaii and is still good friends, but not involved in the business any longer. So that will happen to you as well. I mean, you'll find that your team is dynamic. It's not going to be the same throughout the experience. People are going to come and go depending on what your needs are at the time. And I think it's really important to focus on what is it the company needs at the time.
So you mentioned a couple times that you built a product that didn't work and that, you had some kind of setbacks. Can you tell me what you learned from those and what maybe specifically they were? That
Oh my
you found
gosh.
that the
So-
product didn't work?
So there's some dark days when you're running your own business and trying to, build something. It's lonely. I mean, it is hard. You always hear about the 5-year plan. Well, 5 years is when you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel of, okay, this is getting scalable. We're continuing to grow. We're not losing customers, that sort of thing. But unless you have a compelling B2C that's exploding, which is pretty rare, and get funded, your growth is going to be based on your revenue stream, and so it's going to be slower. For us, we have to wait till we have a new client before sometimes we can build some things because we need the revenue. So our growth has been through client acquisition. But it is hard. Cash flow is everything. It is the all and all. Make or break is whether or not you can cash flow, and it's got to be continuous. I mean, it's not just annually. It's month to month, right? Every month you need to make sure that you've got enough cash flow to run your business. Did that answer your question?
I think I was looking more for what should I not do, so I don't repeat.
Oh.
What. I mean, I know that there'll be trial and error. I know that I'll make mistakes.
What are
and
you
I'll fail.
interested in? What business are you contemplating?
Subscription boxes right now.
Subscription boxes for what?
So
That's okay. I mean, if I understand if you don't want to share it, but your idea that
just
you're
a
really
little
excited
bit
about
intimate.
it.
It's a kind of
intimate,
an
yeah.
intimate subscription box
Oh,
for couples.
it's like middle-aged couples that might need a little spice in their marriage.
Yeah, but not the graphic ones. So I've noticed there's some more graphic subscription boxes for like graphic people. I'm trying to be.
Okay, so
right
it's
now.
a
Then there's date night. There's nothing in between.
so it's B2C. You're looking at
No,
consumer-oriented.
Yeah, consumer. Yeah.
So you'd be selling to consumers. So building a website,
Yes.
marketing your
Facebook
product.
reviews, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the to some degree, I don't have experience starting a consumer business, but to some degree, I think it's easier in the sense that you get feedback faster than you do on a B2B play. You will see whether or not in the first month people are subscribing. What I learned on the B2B side is the blogging and writing about what you're doing is really, really important. And it's how-to stuff. We wrote a blog, how to start an employee giving program in 5 easy steps or something like that. That gets more hits than anything else in terms of driving traffic.
What was that?
How to start an employee giving program in five easy steps. So in your case, you can get really good feedback on whether or not your idea has merit by writing some blogs on how to add some spice to your life when you're, a middle-aged couple, or how to, not necessarily graphic, but just some ideas, and see what kind of web traffic you're getting. Start a website and get that blog going. Start writing about what you're doing and see what kind of interest you're getting. And you can start learning from that right away, and it's inexpensive to do. Oopsie, sorry. It's inexpensive to do that.
So basically, kind of some pre-market research, blogging, and seeing how people react.
I think pre-market research is a really huge thing to do.
Because then you don't spend the money before you start building the product, right?
Right, and you can start building it in your basement, if you get interest. It's really when you've validated that there's interest, you're trying to scale, then how do you do that in a way that's manageable? How do you get, like in the restaurant industry, your first store's hard. And then growing to 3 isn't so bad. But getting from 3 to 10 is a huge leap in our industry. And then getting beyond 10 to having like 100 locations is another huge leap. It takes a different skill set. It takes a different management team. You know, it's just different. You have different things that come into play.
What kind of, I know you talked about blogging a little bit, but what kind of advertisements would you say is like the most efficient or the best that you've?
We don't advertise.
You don't advertise? How
We do on the RoundTable side.
Yeah. How do you?
But GivingTrax side, we don't. RoundTable side, we will post coupons on our website. And then we still will occasionally put coupons in the print that goes out. But most of it, people are Googling for pizza in Tacoma or party rooms in Tacoma. We launched a website, bookmypizzaparty.com, and put our party rooms on it to self-book. And our booking rate escalated by doing that. People want to self-serve. So they can get on there, they can look at the dates, they can look at what kind of parties are conducive to hosting at RoundTable, and we get all kinds of crazy things now. Well, weddings, baby showers. You want it higher? I can take this off and then. Thank you.
So when you posted those on your website about the party rooms, do you think that it worked more because people weren't having to talk to people and they could just set it up? You know what I mean? Because I mean, my girlfriend does, you know, my girlfriend and sometimes even me, I don't want to pick up the phone and call somebody, and I'll literally like search for like an hour because I don't want to deal with somebody on the phone. I mean, I know tons of people who do it, and I know I'm not alone, but.
I believe
You know what I
that's
mean?
permeating the workplace as well. We will rarely get a phone call, but we'll get email inquiries. And our client support is all email based now. It makes it really easy because you can work from anywhere. You can manage your client relationships from anywhere. The party room bookings, I believe that's the case. People want to self-serve. They don't want to call.
So a question on the, I guess the technology side of the business. Thinking of breaking into a new market, how would you go about doing the pre-market research and all that?
A B2B,
Correct.
I would go talk to your potential clients.
Basically, yeah.
Or contact them, email them, and
Yeah.
let them know, instead of blogging, email them your idea. and see
You
if
know,
they're-
just ask if they would be open to coffee and just let them know you're doing some market research or product marketing research. They don't want to be sold to, so if you present it as though you're conducting product marketing research, generally folks would be willing to meet with you and share their thoughts on whether or not that would work with them, for them, or how that might work for them, or share how their process is done currently within their company.
I have a question. You just said they don't want to be sold to. Do you think that applies for B2C as well? For blog purposes? Just talk about what your ideas are, not...
Personally, I believe that's the case. I think people want to research helpful information. They don't necessarily want to be sold to. And you all have received those solicitations. I mean, you spot it in an instant, right? It doesn't take long to feel like this is an ad. It's not going to be helpful. So for those of you that are new, I'm Karrie. My husband and I own 3 RoundTable Pizza stores here in the Tacoma area and started a technology company called GivingTrax that manages corporate and charitable giving programs. So we're talking a little bit about both, just primarily focused on answering questions that folks have about what it's like, what the similarities are, differences, and that sort of thing.
I have a question regarding the GivingTrax. You know, you said there was a lot of long hours, and I guess maybe it's a twofold question. When you realize that you just say, hey, enough, then what propels you to say, hey, we're not going to give up now? Well, what's that number there?
Well, most new businesses fail, and it's not necessarily that the ideas are bad, but it's hard. It takes a long time, and I think it just sometimes takes sheer determination. I mean, who thought Facebook would be what it is today, right? When we first heard about that, we thought it was crazy. Who would want to post online? And I remember being first introduced to Facebook at Annie Wright. We had kids going to school there, and they brought us in to warn us about what our kids were doing. And what happened was all the parents got on, right? And
It's free ad.
yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I think it's just, you got to decide you're going to do it no matter how hard it is, because it's going to be hard, and you're going to have setbacks, and you're going to run out of money, and you're going to wonder whether or not it's worthwhile, and you're going to wonder how many more dark days you might have, and you just got to decide that we're not going to fail. We're not going to be one of those companies that fail. And you will reach a point where you might not know how to fail. You know, like you reach a point of, how would we exit at this point? For GivingTrax, closing down is not an option. We're transacting too many charitable donations. So what is our exit strategy? You know, how do we get to that point where we're attractive to a potential buyer, so we do have an exit down the road when we're ready to retire? But I think that's something that you all might not be thinking about because you're young. But at some point in time, it will come into play in terms of, you know, where do you want to take this business? What's your end game? What's your goal? What's your strategy for exit? Is it like Lance and I decided, my husband, we initially tried to pursue funding for GivingTrax, and we were not funded. And now we're happy that we weren't, because it really affords us a lot of flexibility. Between the two businesses, we can be at home after school when our kids get home from school. We can participate in their activities. So for us, lifestyle at our age was more important than trying to get that explosive growth that one needs to pursue when you get outside funding.
So
That would come into play with what you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm. What would the angel investors or investors looking for?
So our experience was, we went through an accelerator, so we got a little bit of seed money. At the time we were in the accelerator, we were just launching, and what we observed was companies that did not yet have a product but had an idea were getting funded with seed money, and those that had a product and were experiencing significant growth were getting funding. So once you have a product on the market, the investors are going to want to see that that product is selling and selling well, and they will fund your growth, but they won't fund the kind of
The startup.
Right, the startup at that point. And there is a period of time where you do need to invest in your company before you're going to see kind of the results of that. And that window is where we were in the accelerator, and it just wasn't a good time in terms of timing of what's of interest to investors. Yeah.
When things kind of like blow up, like Facebook and Twitter and all, you know, all those kind of social media things, do you think it's because they're marketing towards the younger generation, and then that kind of floods out into what? Oh, sorry, just floods out into kind of like what's cool, and then everyone, you know, then everyone wants to do it, and then it becomes more of a, you know, it's just, why don't you have one? Or do you think it's just, this is so nice and so easy to use for me that everyone wants to use it?
When I look at my kids, the stuff that they're using, when something is cool, that cool factor, it explodes pretty quickly. I mean, Instagram and Snapchat all grew pretty quickly. So what I think is more interesting is those concepts where there's three-way value. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So pet tags and that sort of thing have been in the pet stores for a long time, right? You can go get a pet tag. And you also have to get a license if you have a pet. Well, there was a company up in Seattle that kind of connected everything together. So they provided a cloud software product so you could register your pet, and they got the local jurisdictions to participate in it. So you would pay your pet fee online, and then they got transaction fees kind of all the way around. So they're working with B2B on the side of working with local government organizations that are collecting the animal licensing fees. And then they're working with consumers who have pets. I mean, I think that's a great win-win because there's so many pets and there's so many jurisdictions that want fees for licensing pets, and they don't have tools to do that. Most of it is offline on paper. So those sorts of business models I see have a greater degree of potential success than hoping to get the next Twitter or the next Instagram. Or there's a lot of companies or startups and entrepreneurs that would love to chase that path, but there's not many that really have exploded to that degree.
So the one you're speaking of, it did pretty well, or it's doing pretty well still?
It was launching when we were in the accelerator up in Seattle, and it was doing well. It had gotten a number of jurisdictions to sign up, and once the jurisdiction signs up, then if you had an animal in that county, you had to use the service to register your pet.
So they were
Right.
getting exclusive government contracts then?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still lucrative right now with our kind of changing political climate? Or was it just a state? It was just for the state of Washington?
I haven't followed up with them. I couldn't answer that
Oh.
question, no. They were just up in that kind of the startup community when we were up in Seattle with GivingTrax, and it was just a great example of a win-win.
So when you said the three-way value, so finding maybe a community issue and adding a product and having like a consolidation of services and products, basically, is that what you meant by three-way value?
Yeah, and that's sort of what we're doing with GivingTrax, if you think about it. So we were going after a market that was managing most of their charitable giving on paper. So an employee would have to fill out a paper form and check the boxes and write in the name of the nonprofit and their tax ID number, and they might have to go get that nonprofit's 501c3 letter and so on and so forth in order to get a matching contribution from their employer. And so we're just bridging that gap.
So in the GivingTrax, all the hours that you put in, what was that tipping point that got you over and say, hey, we got a viable company now?
Surprisingly, it was employee volunteerism.
Hmm.
So everyone wants to track what their employees are doing in the community, even if they don't offer a match. They want to know what the employees are doing, and they want to promote that sense of community. How about you two down on the end? What's your idea for your business?
It's an automatic machine for pets, for dogs, to clean up after them.
Oh, so for pet waste.
Yes.
Very cool.
And I do not have one. I'm just.
She's good.
Oh, okay. So we had, I coach robotics, and this past year the theme was animal allies for the robotics competitions, and one of the teams that I coached chose dog waste getting into Puget Sound, and so they invented their kind of dog waste station. That was kind of fun. So we did a lot of research on that problem and current solutions in that space.
Well, he's got
It was kind of
a
fun.
really good product. I mean, it's, especially, in my opinion, especially in this new generation of millennials, because they don't want to live in houses, they want to live like in sheds. You know, and they have big dogs and stuff, but he solves that problem of, okay, we don't have a big yard, but the dog will still go outside and use it, but we don't, it's right here, and we can clean it, and it's sanitized properly, and we throw the solids away. It's pretty cool. So, you guys probably end up talking to each other on this one.
Yeah, it encompasses a whole bunch of different applications. So it's not just home. I mean, it's commercial use as well. And it kind of got involved with just me because I have a service dog and the limitations of where I can actually take her. So such as the airport, things like that. I did the market research, had patent researches done, and there was nothing on the market. So then I went and submitted for the patent. Then I ended up finding out about this. So, yeah, now I'm here.
Very cool. So is your product on the market yet?
No.
Are you in the prototype phase?
Yeah, prototype phase right now. So it's like I was going to look at going to Kickstarter to do it, but this program kind of afforded me the opportunity to get with people who know business, so that way I'm not putting money in places that it doesn't need to be, and then I'm right back at this ground zero again. So, yeah.
Very
So
cool.
it's cash flow. It's
Yeah.
cash.
Yeah, it's cash.
Because I've got a lot of people who want to buy it. I have the market where I can put it out in front of people, but again, if you don't know where to put the money, then you're really just.
Do you
burning
have a
money.
manufacturer?
Yeah, I've got all that stuff done. So
Is it in the country?
no, because for it to be here, it would be significant if we were. So I think that's why a lot of people outsource. I mean, I would like for it to be here. I can get the pieces made over there and then have it assembled here. I mean, I'm just looking at different aspects of how to put it together. So.
Very cool.
So starting your business, do you have to be a salesperson?
It doesn't hurt, but I think if you're uncomfortable with that, it's just being comfortable talking with people. So if you're comfortable talking with people and just asking them questions that will help your market research, most folks are willing to share. And I think it's really more of being a good listener than being a salesperson, because people don't want to be sold to, but they do want to be heard.
Do you believe in partnerships? Like having a partner or doing it by yourself?
We do believe in partnerships. We've had several over the years. On the RoundTable side, we have a silent financing partner. So when I shared earlier that my husband came home one day because KeyBank closed our line of credit and we had to come up with $400,000 by Monday, that was our half. It was really $750,000. So there's, I think it's important to have a financing partner if you are able to do that, someone that you can tap, that can get you over the hump and help with cash flow and that sort of thing. That certainly has benefited us on the RoundTable side to have that. On the GivingTrax side, we've had collaborative partnerships in place. When we first started, we worked with Global Impact, and all the charitable giving that took place on our platform was received by Global Impact, which is a charity. They managed the combined federal campaign at the time, and then they would disperse downstream. The problem with that is it was really expensive when we were doing that. We also attempted a partnership with United Way, and the challenge with United Way was there's a different United Way in every county across the country, and they all operate fairly independently. They're not divisions of one company or such. And so that made it a little bit more difficult in terms of attempting a partnership with them on the charitable giving side. But yeah, I would encourage that. I think there is a place for that, for partnerships.
For the financing partner, how did you decide how much to give him? You know, you're asking him for money, like, are you exchanging percentage or, you know what I mean?
It's a negotiation. So at the time when the structure was first put in place, My husband did that, and his priority was to maintain controlling share. So it's always been important. If you're going to be the owner-operator, you want to be able to have the ability to make the decisions to manage your business. As long as you can hold on to controlling share, the longer the better.
So that sounds like Shark Tank. Is that kind of how, I mean, probably not as dramatic.
That
but that's
is-
the goal. They're trying to get as much ownership because they're giving you money, and you're trying to keep as much so that you can control the company.
So it's a balance. There is a value of the company.
Okay.
I mean, generally, companies are valued when investors invest, and so there's a direct correlation between how much they're contributing and how much shares they ought to receive in return, or what % of your company they ought to receive in return. If the company is in its stage of life where it's difficult to place a value or to calculate the value of the company, then that's more challenging, which is often what you see on Shark Tank. The founders come in thinking their company is worth way more than the cash flow would indicate that it is. On the restaurant side, it's pretty easy. There's an industry standard approach to determining the value based on cash flow. Yeah, yours is a bit unique. There's Fabletics? Fabletics has a similar strategy, and Nordstrom had a strategy. They had a line where they were shipping product on a regular basis, and then you had to opt out if you didn't want to receive
Yeah,
it.
there's
A subscription model, and wine clubs do that,
Yeah.
where you're automatically invoiced and you ship it. I think in that industry, what you need to think about is how much are you going to get back, and how do you want to manage that, and do you want to push product that somebody may or may not want versus allowing them to view it and opt in. And in our industry, we don't have returns, so it makes it really clean. The only time I have a return is if I can't vet a nonprofit as a nonprofit, then we will refund the donor's credit card, but we do that pretty quickly. We don't have costs associated with product coming back.
So how did you come up with the pricing model? I know that, when people donate you go use your services, do you take a certain percentage of the donation?
We don't. So the cost to make a charitable contribution on GivingTrax is purely the credit card transaction fee. We charge the business entity, and companies will pay to manage their charitable giving programs. And it really varies depending on how much they're giving, how complicated their process is, and the value that they're placing in a tool. We do have a standardized approach that we use, and it typically works for 90% of the cases, but we'll come across that one that has a really complicated workflow, or we might come across one that they have 5,000 employees, but their process is pretty simple and centralized, so it doesn't make sense to charge them as much as our pricing model might indicate. So I think there's always that degree of using good judgment that comes into play.
Are you signing term contracts then with the companies?
We won't sign a contract.
It's just an agreement then?
Yep.
On a monthly basis?
Yep.
It's a monthly.
They can prepay for a year if they'd like, but
Do they get a discount if they prepay for a year?
nope.
No, okay.
No, it just makes it easier for them to invoice and to manage. Most companies will want to prepay for a year because it's a hassle for them to process a PO and get checks cut and so on. But yeah, we won't. If somebody wants us to sign a contract, that's a good indicator to us that they're not a good fit.
Okay.
Why not a contract? It's just too much legal stuff involved?
It is, and it costs us money. So our sweet spot is under $25,000. We could burn up 3 to 5 in contract negotiations with attorney's fees. So it just doesn't make sense. We have a subscription agreement. If somebody's not happy, we'll refund their money, but we're not going to sign service level agreements. We're not going to sign contracts that require us to audit what's taking place. We use other service providers. So for example, you guys will have this, facing this as well, is where you're going to run We run on servers at Rackspace. So the compliance, some of the compliance requirements that contracts would place on us is really things that Rackspace has control over, like access to a data center. We can't sign a contract that restricts access to a data center because we don't have control over who goes in and who goes out, for example. I mean, generally there is access control, but we can't identify the specific employees that had access, you know. So it's just better to stay away from those things for us. We do process employee charitable giving, which is sensitive, and so we will have concerns raised about what information do we capture and keep about employees, and we try to minimize that. You know, aside from cash flow, our number one concern is cybercrime. You know, it's huge. There's new breaches every day, and those are just the ones that we hear about. On the RoundTable side, what didn't hit the press is one, I think it's Epson, the printers that print the, so you order online. So moving to online ordering for RoundTable was a really huge deal because it's a franchisee system and we all had different POS systems in place. So they're really late to the market. They finally have online ordering and they got hit with this. So somebody can break into the specific like IP address of these printers and they were able to print content on the order ticket that gets printed off in restaurants that's sent to the kitchen. You know, unfortunately, it was mostly like, ha, 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 I broke into your system stuff, right? But when you're talking about POS systems and online order systems that are capturing credit card information, it was industry-wide. It's really, you know, those sorts of things. People are just malicious. They get off on trying to break into your stuff. And so you can have the best physical security there is, but there's no way as a software company that you can guarantee there's not going to be a breach. You just can't.
So nobody can, really.
You can't anymore. The best thing you can do is to minimize your liability, to make sure you have really good liability insurance in place. And then on the RoundTable side, we've, as a group, RoundTable Corporate negotiated a insurance policy that we can opt in for a response mechanism. So if we were to have a intrusion and if we were to have credit card information that was stolen, then we would be able to use that policy so we weren't personally financially at risk. Yeah,
What's the
long-winded
next
answer.
vertical for GivingTrax? I mean, there's another revenue stream for GivingTrax.
So what we're looking at right now is we've kind of grown this community of nonprofits, and our transaction rates for Visa credit card is 2.2%, which is really low. If a donor gives by debit card, we can set up a process that allows the nonprofit to get their money in 2 hours, which is pretty slick. So we're looking at how can we sell that to the nonprofit community to replace their current plugins for their websites, for their donation processing. They're paying upwards of 8% to have a donation button on their website. There's also many volunteer-based nonprofits that don't have a website yet and have no way to do online fundraising. So we're looking at entering that space and trying to capitalize on this community of nonprofit users that we've developed. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What is your idea? You guys have been talking. Are you working together or is it separate ideas?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your idea?
So we're trying to make virtual reality into a viable business, and one of the ideas we have is taking some of the backlog of information that a lot of the historic preservation committees have. They have a lot of photos, a lot of stuff in their databases that they would like to give new life to. So we would take a lot of their backlog stuff and do a lot of photo stitching and pretty much create new virtual worlds out of their old data and build a platform where people can explore.
So you would sell
Tacomas.
into the historical societies?
Yes, yeah.
To digitize all the old photographs and microfiche and...
Yes. And creating, essentially taking that old data and creating virtual worlds out of them. So that way you can see what Tacoma looked like 100 years ago and actually explore and walk through the city and stuff like that. And so we're kind of like a B2B and a B2C. So if you're a history buff, you can actually go onto the platform and maybe the pricing model is still off, but we charge you a monthly subscription to go and explore different cities.
So it would be like a 3D version, basically, instead of a flat image?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. But
You're
you
talking
would
about-
use all these different location pictures, let's say you had 200 of downtown Tacoma, and you would kind of piece them together to figure out where,
Yep.
what went where, so that it would be like walking through Google Maps, or the, you know, the street view, I guess? Yeah?
Of maybe
Of-
like 1960
yeah.
in Tacoma, yep.
Okay.
And it's I guess the biggest value is actually working with the historians because they'll know the city the best.
Yeah.
So it's really, you know, getting there and telling the story the best. So instead of a plug and play, it's almost like a unique build for each historic committee. So
That's just one of the parts. The other one is more like a media company. So another one would be creating virtual spaces for like museums, art galleries, stuff of that nature.
So you can basically visit the art gallery without going there.
That or adding interactivity to an already created like gallery.
So more experience type things once you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
That is cool. So someone, if, like, say, a museum in LA did it, I could go visit that museum and I would get charged the virtual admission,
yes, yeah.
Cool.
And you'll have access to
which would probably be lower than the,
Exactly.
the next one,
actual.
yeah. So you have essentially just one fee you pay each month.
some of them are, a lot of them are free.
Yeah,
Yeah, and but we could also
Okay.
like incorporate ads into it.
Okay.
So because now you have to see the ad.
Yeah.
But that's something else.
You guys are talking about the glasses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like glasses or just web
Web VR.
VR.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I just bought a new phone and it came with it, and I was like, oh, you know, I was so excited, right? And I was like, and it was awesome for like the first couple of days, and then I started realizing that when I was in it, which I could, like, you know, you travel around the world, and, you know, I was just doing the free apps, but I was just like, this is so dope, right? One of the biggest things that I had a problem with, and I don't know if this has already been solved because I literally have not been on it in a really long time, but everyone around me would be so annoyed, and not because I wasn't saying anything, but because I was in the room with them. They don't have it, or even if they did have it, I still would not
They
be
just-
interacting, and it would just be basically a bunch of people sitting around instead of going to the museum, you know. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, you guys have a way to, like, be able to have. I have virtual glasses. She has virtual glasses, and we can actually still see each other.
Instead of just sitting.
Well,
So
not seeing
not
each other.
seeing each other, but
Yeah.
we came up with a way to where you guys both can interact in the same room.
Okay.
So it's almost like Second Life or PS
Yeah.
Home, where you guys all in the same community.
Okay.
And we're using WebSockets for that.
Interact with other people, connect with social media.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So it's like a bi-directional communication using
Yeah.
using WebSockets. So.
Are you gonna date like that too?
Yeah.
That's what I told them. I said they should do
It's a
virtual.
new use for your product.
Before sell it to like eHarmony, so people before they go on a date, they can go on a virtual date first
So
and pay for that virtual date.
So I had a dinner with my pastor, and he says,
You're going out.
You're not dating.
Going to hell.
You're not dating, right?
and he basically said, do you think rock and roll destroyed this country? I said, what? Rock and roll destroyed this country? He goes, I said, I don't think so, because the music is wonderful. And he goes, no, it did destroy this country. I guess it relates to how different generations are changing. He says that rock and roll destroyed this country because it took the romance out of dating away, because everything's right now. Because remember, he used to, when he talked, he said that when he went to a dance, he would be so scared to sit in the corner, and when he found a girl he wanted to dance with, that slow dance was the very critical one, and the second dance means that she's really interested in you, and you can actually touch her shoulder and smell her hair. But with the virtual, it's just like, wow, this is great, you're dope, yeah.
that-
And it's like, boom,
That's an issue.
does it take the romance away? I don't know. I'm an old guy, so I get what you guys are trying to do. I mean, to experience a museum in Los Angeles and the Louvre and all those places without having to fly over there. But I think to me, flying over there is the fun part too. you know?
Yeah, and that's why, like, part of the thing was, I was always talking to him, is promoting going to those places.
Oh, I see.
So
Yeah.
it's like a sneak peek, so yeah,
Yeah.
go see
A
the virtual,
preview.
but, you know, ads like, hey, come visit us,
Snap
come
it.
over here, actually experience this, you know?
Right.
Yeah. It's better in real life idea.
Exactly, yeah.
Hmm. Wow.
You can use that. I'm just
You guys have any more questions, or do you have anything to add, Karrie? Or I have one more question though. What's the end game for you with GivingTrax and?
So that's our challenge right now. We have 12 years left of our kids either in high school or college, and then we'll want to retire and probably move somewhere warmer, at least in the wintertime. So we're like, how do we do this? With RoundTable, we're really tied to this area. We were talking about this before this session started. So how do you either manage a restaurant remotely like that or sell it? So that's kind of on that side. GivingTrax, I think, will have a natural opportunity to be acquired once we reach a certain volume, simply because of the financial transactions that are taking place, as well as we're a really good fit for larger players who may currently only have a product that, because of its price point, can only be sold into the Fortune 100 or 500, and this fills in that product. We also are getting interest from companies who had products that they sold to nonprofits that may now want to expand into kind of the corporate side of charitable giving. So I think we'll ultimately have an opportunity to be purchased on the GivingTrax side. But I don't, I still see that as a 5-year plan. It'll probably be 10 years in before we have that opportunity where we'll have a buyer who's interested in paying as much as what we would like to receive.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
So from the time of the start of the idea, or the light bulb of GivingTrax, to when it finally got to where you could see the light at the end of the tunnel, how long was that? And then how long have you been?
So we started working on the concept in 2010 and launched in 2012. And then it wasn't until really, I would say 2014, that we pivoted and had a product that we could sell into the corporate space to clients who are willing to pay to use it. And
Okay.
but yeah, so it's been a while. We're cash flow positive, and
always
we're
good.
able to fund our growth through new acquisition. We don't charge a lot for implementation fees, but we have started to charge implementation fees, so that gives us an allocation to continue to pay for new development or enhancements that a particular client might want. But, yeah. Good luck to you all.
Thank you.
I mean, it's
Thank you
fun
so
to
much.
be, yeah, thank you.